just so everybody's aware, I was asked to do this so that we can post this on the website with the board documents or wherever they choose to do it, and or we will not be accused of anything non-transparent.
I wondered about just saying a couple of things about the committee. I mean, Jerry's aware of it, so I could start there. And thank you, thank you, Mike, for doing this with us. So I just wanted to say that this is the reason we're doing this Zoom call is because it just seemed like trying to have an opportunity for more dialogue and only once a month in a public session was going to be difficult. It also, I'm hearing little dings. Okay. It
That's
also,
good.
yeah, it also, you know, in this process, there are several members of the committee who have been spending several hours with Mike regarding educational needs. So it's our administrative staff on the committee have been spending a lot of time with Mike, sort of, you know, having an opportunity to talk with him about the needs of the buildings and their hopes for a renovation project plan. If we would go forward with the renovation plan. And the members that are going to be on today are building professionals that we put on the committee so that we would have some knowledgeable people about buildings and building systems, be able to have a knowledgeable exchange of ideas about those kinds of issues. Scott Fife is here because he was an administrative person at Centerville Schools and participated at Centerville when they would work on facilities needs and a permanent improvement plan that they had there. So he brings that kind of experience to the discussion. And I have encouraged everybody to openly make, you know, bring questions and comments. And I think that's in the best interest of the school board as well as the community and being able to work through, you know, our best option, how to go forward in addressing our facility needs. So just to say there's nobody here that's interested in developing a substandard plan. We all want a plan that brings our facilities up to excellent standards for our school district. So that's all I was going to say. And I don't know, I'm not sure where Jerry is, but
Jerry's here.
oh, is he here? I don't see him.
He's just not here by face. And I'm having a little trouble with my video feed for some reason.
Okay. Well, I wonder how, Mike, how do you suggest we get started? Do you want to say a few words? We had seen, oh, there's Jerry's name. Hi, Jerry.
Hi.
Hey there, Jerry.
Yeah, I wondered if maybe we could start with Mike, you saying a few words about the drafts that you've provided for us, and then we can have a conversation about it.
Okay. And Jerry, could you put yourself on mute? Because I think you're getting a little feedback loop on your PC or your iPad or something. And then also if others don't mind doing the same when they're not talking, that would help. So Judy, if it's okay, I'll do maybe just walk through a timeline of what I've done and when I've done it. And is it okay if I do a screen share as well?
Yes.
Okay, great. Move this over here. All right, can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm going to get started, and I'm still hearing a feedback loop. Maybe it's Craig's iPad.
Might
or
be.
Jerry's. Are
I'm
you
not
able
sure
to?
how to mute it.
Oh, okay.
I'm trying to.
There you go. I think that solved it.
Mike,
Yes.
I wonder if we should do like Mills Lawn, and then should we have a discussion after that, and then the high school, the middle high school?
Sure. I'll start with that, but if it's okay, I'll just do a kind of a timeline of my role. And first of all, I appreciate the opportunity to spend some time with you all and bring you up to speed on where I'm at with my portion of this. So originally I was brought on in early 2022, essentially as an advisor to the facilities committee meeting. I think our meeting started around springtime, and the push at that time was to hire a maintenance plan advisor to look at renovation scope, et cetera. So I helped along that process of the selection process and the interview. I wasn't a voting member, but kind of helped provide some advisement throughout that process. And then in July, the committee and the board decided to hire me to essentially supplement the work of MOTS. MOTS was going to be looking at the systems, infrastructure envelope, and there was some concern that we wanted to look at the educational adequacy issues as well. So in July, we were hired to begin that process. And so I've essentially been running kind of a parallel process with MOTS, who's been looking at the systems, and I've been looking at the planning aspects. On August 1st, I held a first work session with Mills Lawn in the middle school and high school. And that was essentially a listening session where I went in and listened to Jack, to Joy, to AD, to Megan and Terry. We walked each building space by space and just listened to their concerns that they have from an educational perspective, as well as input they've had from their teachers with their concerns. On the 22nd of August, I followed up with a second work session where I presented a kind of a drawing that showed what the issues were around it. And you may recall seeing those presented. It was kind of the drawing with all the red marks on it that kind of highlighted the issues from the buildings. And I confirmed that those issues were in fact what they were communicating. At the same time, I presented a draft of a master plan to address those issues. Those meetings happened on August 22nd and 23rd. On the 25th and the 29th, in that work session number 2, I received feedback. So I updated those drawings based on their feedback, forwarded it to them. And then on September 1st, I did a presentation of this to the facilities committee. The presentation of the draft on September 1st. And then if you recall, there was a request to do a kind of a direct mirrored presentation on September 8th, where I gave the board the exact kind of same presentation. On the 7th, we did a building tour of Oakwood. On the 3rd, I did an area analysis. And then on the 10th, I've had a third work session with Mills Lawn and the high school. And at this work session, what we wanted to make sure is we're incorporating staff comments. The draft plan was forwarded to teachers and staff at both schools. Their comments were recorded in a survey format on a pretty long Excel spreadsheet. And on the 10th, I sat down with each of the principals to kind of filter and review that and to make sure the master plan was picking up all of those comments. So that was completed on the 10th. On the 18th, I circulated those drawings back out to the principals, Judith, Dorothy, the superintendent, and that plan that I sent out on the 18th, and I made a couple minor edits on square footage, will be the same plan I plan to present next Tuesday as kind of the final master plan. And if it's okay, Judith, I'll start with Mills Lawn. We have the existing building shown here on the screen. I'll note that there's an intervention specialist room that's floating above the storage in the lower level, as well as a kiln room and the art room. And then also point out the modular, the storage in the band room here. This was the issues drawing that was presented and reviewed. And then this is the final draft of the Mills Lawn addition renovation plan that kind of incorporates everything I just outlined that we went through in those work sessions, as well as the facilities committee meeting and the board presentation. I just at a high level, maybe for those watching online who haven't seen this before, the yellow represents proposed additions. And so this is a 2 music room and art room addition that would essentially replace the modular, but also give the school some additional square footage in the building. The second addition here in yellow is a kitchen expansion. And the current kitchen area would be renovated with new kitchen equipment, and we would do some openings in the wall to open up that area to the student dining room. And a third small addition here shown in yellow is what I'm calling a corridor extension. That was some feedback I received. I think it was smart to provide access to adjacent classrooms for 4th and 5th grade without having to kind of walk through the library. The areas in gray are we're calling targeted system improvements. And the idea here is that in 2002, there was an addition to the school, pretty significant sized addition. And the concept here is that maybe that can be thought of separately. And if you walk through the 2002 additions today, they're in pretty good shape from a finish-wise standpoint. So the thought was to differentiate the 2002 additions in particular as potentially needing less work than the 1950s era buildings. And then the area in blue is what I call the deep renovation. And these are the 1950s portions of your school. And the major change here at Mills Lawn was the creation of a secure vestibule and a renovation of the office area. So that adds, and I'll kind of zoom in on that here for folks online. Adds a single point of entry and a secure vestibule that drives visitors into a reception area where they can be ID badged and then allowed into the rest of the school. Also, there was a major renovation of the restrooms envisioned here. Creation of an open space, an extended learning space for kids in the K2 wing. And those are the highlights. I have area summaries. Generally, this was planned for 350 students in the K6. But just in summary, this plan, if it's all built out, is just over a 5,000 square foot additional square footage than they have today. Okay, and then next Judith, you suggested we stop here and maybe discuss this before we move on to the middle school, high school.
Yeah, I think that might work a little better rather than going back and forth. One thing I wondered if you would go over on the new plan. So there's that, there are some additional, so there's obviously the art and 2 music rooms. 1 music room is replacing the trailer, correct?
Yes.
And then if you go down the K2 wing, there's that extended learning. There is also, I can't, what else was added on? Can you just go over?
Yeah, sure. I'll give us
Trying to get it a
tour.
little bigger here. So yeah, if you want to, and if you can explain, I mean, I think it would be good at the meeting on Tuesday to hear from the administrative staff, the educators, you know, why they're making the recommendations they're making. But I also thought maybe you could walk us through it a bit since you've talked with them in terms of some of those changes.
Sure. Why don't I'll take a step back, and before we kind of look at the solution is to kind of talk about what the problems that were identified. And
Mm.
in the office area in particular, there's no secure vestibule. So once you enter the school, you're in. So some physical constraints and some architecture to address that. Also on the administrative side is they're kind of spread out all over the place. There's some in the office area. Then you go down a hall and you've got some counselor and clinic, and then in this area here. So the idea was to consolidate your administrative functions together. As we move down the K1 wing, the biggest issue down here was the choke point of the sink as well as the restrooms, which greatly needed renovating. And then there's some right sizing that needed to happen where you have reading centers and intervention specialists in full-size classrooms that didn't necessarily need to be in full-size classrooms. So with some kind of reorganization or restructuring, kind of using the space a little bit more smart. The other need identified down this whole wing was just some open space. Right now, if you go down that wing, this is what you'll see. And the folks, the users, the principal, the teachers were expressing the desire just to have some open space down here. Here you can see the choke point where the sink comes out. You've got evidence that happens today of small group rooms that's happening in chairs and desks just out in that hallway. So the request was to find and make and create some open space somewhere in this wing. There's concern about the kitchen being too small, a major choke point being between the kitchen and the gymnasium. And I will show you a picture of that condition. So this is a photo of that condition today. And so when students are queuing and getting their food, they're essentially blocking the hallway. And so students on the west side or the east side who are trying to kind of get back and forth, it creates not a great situation in terms of congestion. So desire to come up with a solution that fixes that. And then the art room, and you'll see that in the addition, was basically kind of my recommendation was the art's not in a great spot today. There's not an art storage room. The kiln room is actually up a set of stairs. And while there are some windows between the art room and an internal corridor, there's really not hardly any natural light, and it's not a great spot. So I thought it made sense to backfill that current art room with an academic space and then go ahead and build a new art room that would have, northern exposure and eastern exposure with windows, and then backfill that current art room with just a classroom, which made some more sense. And then music today is down here, west of the gym. And the thought was if we're going to build the addition, to go ahead and put the music room out in the new addition and then backfill that music room with an academic space. And the end result of that puts grades 3, 4, 5, and 6 all west of the gym. So we've got a pair of 3s, a pair of 4s, 5th grade, and 2 6th grades, as well as our intervention specialist. And we're able to achieve that essentially a 3-6 wing by moving art out and moving music out. So that's the rooms in addition to the music room needed if the modular is taken away. And then on the east side of the gym, we have our office area with a secure vestibule, and then a what's like a K2 wing. So I mentioned the K2 wing that has this new extended learning area that we're going to create by removing a wall and create open space, open to outdoor learning space as well. And then the 3-6 version of that of open space would happen in their library, which is right here. And it's a really nice size to handle that. You'll see a room with the word flex on it. The students come in different sizes per grade. So there is need to have a flex classroom in grades 3 through 6 and a flex classroom in grades K to 2 if there's a bubble. So if there's a larger kindergarten enrollment or a larger 1st grade enrollment or 2nd grade enrollment, that would happen in this flex room. And then likewise, if there's a third or fourth or fifth or sixth grade bubble, that would happen in this flex room. And I believe if they're not needed for flex, they're used for project-based learning and other things, which I know Megan could speak to definitely more eloquently. There was a desire for a new or a teacher workroom, and I'm proposing that happen right here in the middle of the plan. So that would be one for the whole building, and that's right adjacent to the administrative area. And then the solution for the student dining issue was to create the addition for the kitchen, turn the existing kitchen into a serving area. And then by creating some openings in the wall with possibly some overhead coiling doors, create a condition where it is more open and the flow from the serving area out to the student dining room would be much better and much more improved. So the serving areas where the students would come out of the corridor, grab food internally and then move into the student dining room, so that congestion in the hallway would be fixed. There were a lot of comments from teachers on this third round in work session 3 on kind of where they go. So I met with Megan on special ed spaces, the psychologist, the special ed director, the clinic, the counselor, where all these functions go. They want to be together, but they want to have their own space for their own needs. Principal's office is here. The conference room stays. And then you can see the reception and secretarial area and a kind of an open space for a copier. The 2 restrooms, 1 restroom for the administrative area and 1 restroom for the clinic. So I hope that was not too much detail, but that's a kind of an overview of the thoughts behind how this was organized and why additions were created and the thought process behind what was going in the additions.
Does anybody have any questions or comments?
So Mike,
Yes.
my
Oh,
first
I'm sorry,
question
Dave.
would
Go
be,
ahead, David.
hi there, would be to do with the conference room. So it is shown as getting a renovation. Is that room not pretty darn decent as it is?
Yeah, no, it's not bad. You could argue that this could be shown as gray instead of
Okay.
blue.
Yeah. And then I know that Dorothea had mentioned on numerous occasions tornado shelter.
Yes.
Would we just be doing like reinforcing the doors or something on the hallways?
No. And I'm going to take some notes if you don't mind. Conference. So the thought process on the tornado shelter is the option of hardening, and I've outlined it here with this dashed line. And we may not need to do it all. It may just need to be 2 classrooms. I would need to run the calcs.
Mhm.
The requirement is that we house all students and all staff 5 square feet per person in those spaces. Then you have to subtract inefficiencies for existing furniture. But the thought would be you would harden a portion of that new addition that would become your storm shelter.
Okay.
That would serve the entire student population, but we weren't proposing to do anything in existing corridors or
Okay.
Would,
elsewhere.
if you hardened that whole addition, wouldn't that eliminate the windows that you're trying to put in the art room?
So there are storm shutters that can be installed that would come down and cover the windows. And one thought I'm having is to create the storm shelter out of the 2 music rooms only, if there's sufficient square footage to do that, which would eliminate the need for those storm shutters over windows in the art room.
Yeah.
Along David's question about the conference room, why is we have, the conference room, isn't being changed. There's the teacher workroom now. Is there still a teacher's lounge?
No.
I mean, the workroom is served both purposes, or the lounge served both purposes in the past. So
So
that's being, so the teachers don't want a lounge
no, so
or a place to eat
current-
lunch or whatever that serves.
the current situation is that on the east side of the plan, there's a teacher workroom over here. And then there's what they call the teacher lounge over by the west of the kitchen. They're in two different locations. In our proposal, we would turn the teacher's lounge into a small group room serving the 3-6 wing. And then we would eliminate the other teacher workroom and consolidate those into one location here in the center. So that would be they would have say a kitchenette in there. They would have access to a restroom in there. There'd be a table. There could be some storage workstations if they chose. That would be a kind of a design exercise to figure out exactly what they want in there. But that's
Yeah.
that's the thought.
In the time that I've been involved with Mills Lawn over the last 10 years, the space in the library end of the building, teachers typically would put their lunches in the refrigerator and they might use the microwave to eat them up, but they didn't eat them there. This year, occasionally someone is actually eating in that room. And then that room was often used for other purposes, for that small space to deal with, 1 or 2 students for some particular reason. So it served double duty, as well as being the room. It's actually labeled the electrical room. It does have 3 electric panels in it and a miscellaneous storage and some exercise equipment. And so yes, it's a catch-all, but I just want to make sure that everything that it catches is being accommodated somewhere else or clearly understood that it's being eliminated.
I wanted to ask, in the initial renovation plan, the rooms around the library were not going to be deeply renovated. Now, one thing I wanted to ask you to do is describe what deep renovation means. But I'm also wondering why they've been added as requests for deeper renovation. Another thing I wanted to say, which you didn't mention, which I think will be of interest to people, is all those doors that on the, I guess that's the west side of the building, there's a door that goes into every classroom, I think. And those are being eliminated, are they not? The doors to the exterior.
Oh, the exterior doors. So yeah, one of the requests was to eliminate where possible exterior doors. And so the 2002 edition, each of these rooms has a door to the exterior, and they don't need them because there is 2 means of egress out of those classrooms to other areas. So I believe those can be eliminated. There was also a request to eliminate the doors out of the wing up here on the northwest. And without a code review, I'm not certain we can eliminate all of them. And that's because there's not exiting out of each of these rooms. They're exiting through the library into an exit corridor. So we may not be able to eliminate all of these just because we're going to have to provide means of egress for those.
A couple of notes. Those exterior doors are the doors that allow handicap access to those rooms. All of those rooms require going up a small flight of stairs to get to at the present time. So that's an important consideration. Also, not shown on this drawing, but there are corridors at either end of the library. They're not full walls, but the route, I mean, it isn't literally through the library to get to the rooms. No one needs to walk in the library ever except to go to the library. It's just a matter of what you.
Yeah, so
Yes,
this
is a corridor here, separate from the library. The entrance to the library is here, and then at this far end, you can't actually see. I mean, there's a whole nother room that we're calling part of the library. It's currently where using computers is taught. And then there is a wall here with a corridor on the other side of it that connects from the entryway on the outside and classrooms. And then there's a corridor all along the west side of the library. So there's, at the present time, there's no need to walk through the library.
Well,
Unless you want to call the library something different than the way it's currently used.
yeah,
I mean,
and-
this corridor currently has band instruments stored in it.
Mhm.
It's,
I want to go back to the question about deep renovation, what it entails, and why these additional rooms were added to that.
Sure. So I originally had these is shown as targeted systems, shown in gray. And there was a request from the teachers who occupy these spaces that they would like their rooms renovated as well, just so at the end of the day, if they weren't renovated, that they would be the only ones, you know, of the 1950s era's building that don't have new ceilings and carpet and flooring and furniture and whatnot. So there's a request to add that scope. So kind of all classrooms were being dealt with the same.
okay, so Mike, this brings up a question I had. In our original proposal, we talked about upgrades and then the new terminology of deep renovation has come along. What is that continuum? What's considered to be an upgrade? You know, you put in a drop ceiling. I wouldn't call that a deep renovation. I mean, in my first thought, at what point does it switch from new coat of paint, new carpeting, new furniture to, I tend to think of deep renovation meaning more like we're moving walls around, or we're changing the whole mechanical system. Can you explain to me, you know, what constitutes a deep renovation as opposed to an upgrade?
Sure. And person analogy I'll use is the Oakwood tour that I think many of us on this call were on. That was an example of targeted system improvements. So when you walk through that school today, on the inside, you don't necessarily see that there's a new roof and new HVAC and new electrical and new plumbing and new technology. You don't see all that. You kind of just see the existing classroom. So maybe said another way, targeted systems improvements, if we did that to this wing of the building that I'm showing you the photos of, when we're finished, it would look just like that. You would have the roof fixed, the systems replaced, likely new ceiling and new lighting because the ceilings would be removed, but nothing to address any finishes. You know, existing walls remain, flooring remains, furniture remains, etc. In a deeper renovation, what we're proposing was not only would you have all the systems upgraded, but you would have in certain areas, you know, removal of some walls to create an extended learning area, maybe take some rooms and divide them into two, so you can have a sensory room and an intervention specialist, potentially moving some doors, creating a teacher workroom where there isn't any, maybe eliminating some interior walls and opening up an art gallery space, creating some small group rooms. We call this kind of reprogramming. It's where structural load-bearing walls are mostly all left intact. But for non-structural walls, if you need to add a wall or remove a wall, you do so to meet the program. So at the end of the day, in the areas shown on this diagram in blue, as you would walk in and it would have new flooring, you know, new furniture, new casework, new windows, and then all new systems. Versus the area in the gray, say those 5th and 6th grade classrooms, when you'd walk into them, into the future after you're done, it would look just like they do today.
Because part of what I'm getting at is that one of the responses to this drawing has been to say, okay, deep renovation costs this much, the gray area costs this much, the yellow area costs this much. And it occurs to me that we want them colored as accurately as we can to reflect the actual cost of what's going to take place. So for example, if it's rooms where you take out walls or put in new walls, whatever, that seems to me that might be a more expensive procedure than if you're, painting and replacing the carpeting in the ceiling. Or, if we look up and down the 1952 corridor, well, obviously creating that open learning space is a big change, or it
Yes.
appears to be a big change. Whereas some of the classrooms are staying exactly in the same boundaries that they are now. That's just the concept I'd like to present.
So you're saying, Richard, that we would have one more level of renovation
Well,
rather than just deep and targeted? We'd have another level.
when our task on this facilities committee is to present the school board with sufficient information to make
Mhm.
decisions about what not only needs to be done, but also what the cost of it is going to be. And it's working on trying to decide how precise it's appropriate to be on estimating those costs. Because if the more, quite bluntly, the more that we say we're going to do deep renovation on, the closer we get to building a new building. If deep renovation is not deep renovation, it's, we were not redoing everything, then I think it needs to be clear.
Wanted to make sure that Jerry and Craig get a chance to say something here if they've got any comments they want to make. And if they don't, that's fine.
Mike, David Roach again. Going over to the, over there on the left, it's between the two sixes. You've got the intervention room. And that seems like a huge space, because normally wouldn't there only be maybe 4 or 5 kids in the intervention room at any one time?
I don't have the exact numbers.
Yeah.
That is how it's being used today. But I do believe these are your MH students, so they use the restroom there for those students. There are
Okay.
requirements for more square footage for those kinds of needs. It's also where you do OT and PT, which stands for occupational therapy and physical therapy. And there's
Okay.
some apparatus, equipment, and things in there that take up
Yep.
some space.
Okay. And then while we're in that, if you go to the 5th grade classroom there in the gray, though out from those down where we have sort of targeted system improvements written, that direction is facing over to the stoplight and the intersection on Xenia Avenue. And one of the comments that the teachers there had was that there was quite a bit of noise. Now, I know there's no Jake brakes or anything, but you still have semi trucks and everything. They'd be driving off from that. Would it help if there were some evergreen trees or something planted out a ways from that as part of it to try and reduce the noise level in there? Because they already have, I believe, they are definitely double glazed windows.
Yeah.
So we can't really deaden it much more glass wise.
Yeah, I don't think trees are going to do much to help
Really?
either. And I did not hear that complaint in my engagement with folks.
Yeah, it was the teacher in room 5 in that 5. She just said that you really hear a lot of traffic in that room.
Yeah, I did not hear that. And
Okay.
just my opinion of that is that, that could be a concern, but, it's a solid masonry building. You
Yeah.
got brick and
Yeah.
and block, and you've got windows that are thermally broken.
Mhm.
It doesn't seem like there's a lot more you could do
Yeah.
to mitigate that.
Well, that's all I have to
Yeah.
say.
If Jerry and Craig, do you guys have anything to add on this? And maybe we can move on to the middle high school, if not. Oh, if we're replacing lighting, I do have a question. If we're replacing lighting, which we're going to be doing, and I know at Oakwood, when I thought they said they replaced, at least in the hallways, but I thought in the classrooms ceilings, is that not true?
Yes, yes. So at Oakwood, they installed a completely new mechanical system. And so every classroom has, they call these the VRF cassettes that are installed above the ceilings. And then above that, there's refrigerant piping and fresh air ductwork and electrical and technology and all kinds of things. So to do the project, the ceilings were removed from the classrooms, the work was done, and then new ceilings installed and new lighting at that time. So if you're going to do a complete HVAC system replacement, you're most certainly getting into a ceiling and lighting replacement as well.
Okay, but that's still targeted systems versus
It
deep
is.
renovation. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
All right. We ready to move on, you guys?
Yeah, what's nice about this, Mike, is that you can pretty much do all the construction without affecting the classrooms, which is I think a big plus for the way you've drawn it.
Yes.
Mike,
Okay,
I want to throw one more thing in.
Yes, sir.
As I pointed out, I'm much more aware of Mills Lawn than I am the high school, although I'm sure there are similar things. There are conditions right now, today, that I think most people would agree are not appropriate. All our planning and efforts that we're making are talking about 2, 3, 4 years down the road. What can we do to mitigate issues that are affecting the day-to-day life of the people in the building right now? Is there, I mean, without, spending smaller amounts of money on repairs or improvements that aren't big investments, they may disappear when the deep renovation is done. But until then, it seems appropriate, why would you caulk windows that you're going to replace? Well, you caulk them because you don't like cold air blowing into your classroom.
Right.
Or you're having problems with restroom function. It seems to me that can be dealt with without completely rebuilding the restroom until
Correct.
that time. And I think even in our proposal for the facilities committee, there's an item that says we're supposed to look at identify immediate needs and estimate costs to address immediate needs. And maybe you haven't heard immediate needs from your working with the administration and teachers and staff, but many of us have heard them one way or another.
Well, I agree with you that there are maintenance issues that have been surely brought to our attention, brought to Motz's attention and others through staff comments that, like, for example, I forget exactly where it was in the building, but when someone flushes the toilet, it smells like sewer gas. Or there are things that are happening that are maintenance items, which really would need to happen right away. And you wouldn't need to wait to the end of November 23, hypothetically, to pass a bond issue and then a full design cycle and a bidding cycle. You have issues that could be addressed today that don't need to wait. I'll also say that one thing that will help that would be, the quicker a decision is made on what the master plan is. And I think that's affected some of the maintenance in the recent past is, if there's an issue on the ballot to do a new K-12, it could have been limiting, their interest in investing a lot of money in the existing buildings. As you said, kind of throwing good money at bad. So I think the quicker we get to a consensus, the district gets to a consensus on what the master plan is, what buildings are being saved and what the plans are moving forward, I think that'll help as well.
I wanted to say on that issue, that the school board, I've asked that discussion, because we heard from several teachers at last school board meeting about specific issues that I've let the superintendent and the president of the school board know that I really feel we need to address those, that we cannot let those kind of conditions continue, that they need to be addressed more really immediately. And I understand it's going to be on the agenda for the school board meeting next week. I wanted to let you know, Craig Conrad has texted me that he thinks you have him muted, Mike. You maybe had some comments he wanted to make, or is he doing something wrong?
I don't think I have the ability to mute him because I'm not.
No, it would be Scott. Are you there?
No, I think that was me getting unmuted.
Oh, there you go.
It didn't give me that option until just now, so I'm back.
Okay. Sometimes you have to tap it, the screen.
Yeah. I just wanted to say something about the handicap accessibility in the 57 wing or whatever wing that's called. It is from the interior, and that's part of the problem with, the kids in wheelchairs have to go because there's two ramps, one that goes up to each side, and those were put in to cover handicapped kids. You can't really access them from outside. I think there might be one room that had a handicapped kid that they built a ramp so that they could get in from the outside directly into that classroom. But the only other way of accessing that is in through the library.
Correct. The bottom of the ramp, as you can see in the photo, is in the middle of the library.
Yes.
So to get to that accessible point, you have to kind of navigate to the middle of the library and then up either side.
Yep.
Okay, Jerry, anything from you? Jerry on here? I can't see him. All right, well, I guess yeah.
Judith, I'd like to just make one comment if I could.
Yeah.
It's not really a question. Mike, I just want to compliment you on the way in which you've organized this information in your presentation. I really appreciate that you've started with the problems, and then your documentation seems to flow from that beginning of, here are the problems that we have, and then this is what you're proposing in order to address those. I think that's a great framework, and the more we can stick with that approach, the easier this difficult job is going to be, in my opinion. That's just my 2 cents worth, but I really appreciate that. You really seem to have a good grasp of the educational process, some of the legal things that go along with it, what's going on in the schools and how that impacts the physical environment. And I just want to compliment you for that.
Thank you, Scott. And if you don't mind me, just another comment is, I did listen, but I also pushed back on things that some things that didn't necessarily feel correct. For example, for a building of 350 students that has a stage onto the gym, having 2 music rooms is definitely a luxury. You don't see elementary schools that have 350 students with 2 music rooms. So I brought that up a couple times, and Megan was strong on the issue of needing to have two, and it has to do with how they use the building, how they schedule the building, how teachers are brought together when their students are in the specials. It gives them some more time to collaborate as teachers. So I just wanted to note that too, that this plan, doesn't represent what you have to do. It just represents the input that was received from the administrators, the principals, the staff on kind of creating a vision of keeping the buildings, but still addressing their concerns. So
Actually, I did have a comment here. In terms of the stage, when we went to Greenan, they had, their gym, then they had a stage, then they had a wall, a movable wall, that was soundproof, they said. So they used the stage as a room. And I wondered, both in the grade school and in the high school, if that would be an option. I don't know how that space is being used throughout the day. But it struck me that that could be a good way that could save potentially building, one of those new spaces. What do you think, Mike?
So we do that actually all the time, where we'll
Mhm.
have a stage with an operable wall that separates it, that allows you to have a separate function on the stage while something is happening in the gym or the cafeteria. To get that to work well, you need to install a proper operable wall. These are track hung off of a massive steel
Right.
beam. So they're better done in new construction, where you can plan on the columns, the footings, the massive beam that holds that operable wall. I don't want to say it would be impossible, but it would be a lot more expensive to do in a renovation, because that beam's not there and those columns aren't there. So you'd have to do some pretty intense surgery to make that happen. So it is a good idea. It is tough to do in a renovation though. Cost
Well,
effective.
but it's got to be cheaper than a new room.
No doubt.
Okay.
No doubt.
I mean, not, yeah. Okay.
You've brought up something that triggered something else I wanted to ask. When I hear different things from different people about what happens when certain levels of work are done to a building, and then when it triggers other renovations or other upgrades. In other words, if you build new, then you have to have A, B, and C, because the state requires it. If you're remodeling, you don't have to do those upgrades. What happens in a mixture like this, where there's some new building and some significantly changed building? Does that mean that every bathroom has to, meet certain standards, or whatever, what other requirements kick in according to building regulations or whatever powers that be?
Yeah, so this would be a kind of a mixed scope project. The new additions would be designed to meet code. We would do deep renovations where we need to, and for example, in the restrooms on the K2 wing, we would install those to meet ADA. But the beauty of this approach is when you go back to the 2002 edition, that's only 20 years old. You don't have to do anything to those restrooms over here. Those were all done post ADA. So that's kind of the beauty of a mixed approach, is that you can dial the scope to a budget. Unlike a new building where you can't have to the new building, you have to do it completely. You have to do all structure, all systems, all finishes. But In a renovation addition project, you can kind of, deploy a strategy of where you go deeper and where you make your deeper upgrades, where you put additions on, and where you can save some dollars by not doing work where you don't need it.
Are we ready to move on to the middle high school?
I think so.
Okay. Grades 7 to 12. And this is the existing floor plan. Couple things I'll point out. Here on this end of the drawing is the first floor of the 3-story tower. So the second floor and the third floor are stacked here on the lower right side of the drawing. Second floor stacks on first and third on second. So that's a unique feature of this building. There is a lower level mechanical room that happens below the first floor of the tower, that happens below this area. And then this portion of the building we call the spaceship. And then the other portion is the portion of the building, it's called the modulars, but it's a kind of a permanent modular setup here on the left side of this drawing with these classrooms and the required ramps to get up to it. The 2002 edition in this case is on the top side of this drawing up here, and it wraps around. Same thing, we went through an issues list. Starting with the front door, there is no secure vestibule here and the desire to create one. I'll add that this is more of a challenge of creating a secure vestibule than Mills Lawn, because you enter right into a corridor and the office is on the other side. And you need that corridor to circulate around the building. So that was a difficult challenge. There were concerns expressed about ADA issues and the spaceship, desire for some theatrical improvements to the stage. There's a request, well, the desire for more space around the basketball court. It's 50 by 84 feet, and there's about 2 feet 9 inches at end, from end court line to wall and end court line to front of stage. But if you're going to do a new gym today, we would be looking at around 10 feet minimum for that runoff space. We have some administrative spaces that are sprinkled around the building, underutilized locker rooms. And then you see the area demarcated as the shoebox, the question about what its future is. You have an underutilized corridor that was part of that 2002 edition. The restrooms, a strong desire to expand them and make them accessible. You have a French classroom that's right here, and you have a serving area that's kind of poorly positioned into the corridor. You have a French classroom, which honestly I said was the right room in the wrong location. You have the Kiva, which is kind of effectively made the cafeteria smaller. So the thought was to take that out and open up that space, as well as maybe add some operable walls or garage doors or something to open the library to the cafeteria space. In the 3-story tower, you have an intercommunicating stair with guardrails that don't meet code, spacing between the vertical pickets that don't meet code. So, and also you have conditions where it's open, it's an open stair. So a desire in this process to make some safety improvements at both of your open stair locations. As we move up the tower. Yes.
Michael, could I just make a comment? And I know it's a little bit nitpicky, but we do seem to get, chopped up by people listening or reading what we put in the paper or anything. So where you say it's not to code, it's not to today's code.
Correct.
It's perfectly acceptable, but it's not to today's code.
Correct.
Yeah. Yeah.
And this is an example of something that we would kind of highlight, that if there's going to be a renovation project and money spent in this building, this is an example of something that could be improved, brought up to today's code, that would make that safer. So yes, it's grandfathered under your the code in which it was installed. As we move up the tower, there are no restrooms currently being used for students in floors 2 or 3. And so there's a lot of complaints and comments about the time it takes students or staff who are in the upper floors of that building to get down to the first floor restrooms, and those are too small to begin with. So the desire to add restrooms, perhaps just on the second floor, that would allow second floor and third floor occupants closer access to restrooms. You've got some classrooms that are frankly oversized by state standards up here. So there's an opportunity to maybe right size those. And the proposed solution we have here is, again, the additions in yellow, deep renovation in blue, and then the targeted system improvements in gray. The first addition that's conceived is kind of a new secure vestibule entry and a new office area. So that takes the offices that are on the other side of this corridor, moves a portion of those functions here, and then expands the office functions where they're in their current location to add things like the psych office and guidance storage and therapist and whatnot in the clinic. And then next to that, some performing arts spaces. So one of them is envisioned as a choir, theater, rehearsal classroom, which currently happens in this location. And then some storage spaces and director's offices and restrooms that then would separate a larger instrumental room, just over 2,100 square feet. Relative to the storm shelters, envisioned that maybe this box could be designed as your storm shelter for that school. The gray area is, most of this is the 2002 edition. So looking at strategic systems upgrades, replacement of mechanical equipment, things related to the MOTS report. Also, as we were flipping the school, we're moving the high school in this proposal to the first floor and moving the junior high up into the tower. These labs that are currently your junior high labs would become high school science labs. So there's some improvements like adding a fume hood or adding some gas that would be required to make those serve the high school functions.
What is the reason for that flip?
The reason is, and I would love to hear Jack's thought on this too, but the thought was that when the, and I haven't kind of got to this yet, but if the shoebox is removed and new classrooms are added, and you have the new performing arts spaces, that you essentially have what will feel like a new building, and that kind of from a strategic standpoint, the thought was, wouldn't it be nice if that capstone, or essentially that new building, would be for your high school students? There's a lot of other functions on this floor, the engineering lab, the art rooms, spaces that the high school students use, that makes sense to kind of all be on the first floor. And then the middle school could then go back up and into floors 2 and 3 of the tower. Middle school comes a bit more kind of self-contained up there for grades 7 and 8. And also they don't have the footprint. Middle school doesn't have the footprint as grades 9, 10, 11, and 12 do. So those are some of my thoughts. I know Jack could probably add more to it. All right. This has been something that's been discussed for a long, long time, is in this proposal, we would take the opportunity to remove the modular classrooms and the, kind of the semi-permanent modular construction, remove that and replace it with a new addition. And in this concept, the addition would abut right up to that existing corridor. So we take advantage of that corridor. We don't have to rebuild it since it's already there. That was installed in 2002. And then just add 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 classrooms. So we have our self-contained special ed, a pair of math rooms with a dividing wall, and a social studies and an English language arts room with a dividing wall, and also create some of the small group rooms that they're requesting. The blue area, the kitchen, concept is to expand that, create a serving area where your current French classroom is, and then take the boys' restroom and the girls' restroom and expand those into the custodial storage room. So these would be ADA compliant and larger. And then remove the kiva and make some of those modifications between the library and the student dining room I mentioned, like some operable walls. And then as we go up the tower, as this becomes 7th and 8th grade, start on the 3rd floor, you'd have middle school math and science, middle school social studies, English language arts, and an intervention room. All of these would be new dividing walls, so that those could all be opened up into one room or closed into 3. And I mentioned there are some existing large classrooms there today. This is an example where you take 2 large classrooms and turn it into 3. A middle school science stays where the high school science lab is. That makes sense to reuse that. And then we pop down a floor, request to do similar to what we're doing on Mills Lawn by removing the wall and creating a middle school extended learning area, as well as a new restroom core for boys and girls. A student advocate would move here, and health and career tech, and then a sensory room. Also in this proposal, I failed to mention it, was the removal of the band room, the spaceship, as it's being replaced with new construction. So you've got some larger pieces moving around here than at Mills Lawn, but go ahead and open it up for questions or comments.
Wondered if, since Jerry hasn't spoken, if he wants to say something, because I know he has been thinking about this issue. I don't know if you want to, Jerry, but.
Well, I'll kick my 2 cents in. I've said it before about it's a shame to get rid of square footage that we have. I understand why you're doing it, but it just seems like because you're not really gaining any space as far as what they call a shoebox by getting rid of it and just replacing, square footage for square footage, and maybe even a little bit less. It just seems like, and I understand, like I say, I understand why you're putting the rooms where you're putting them, because you already have a corridor. You don't have to waste money on building a new one. It just seems a shame to get rid of square footage that you have. I don't know that it's a deal breaker, but it just seems that way to me.
Mike, David Roach. So I would agree with Craig's comment there. So backing out of this ever so slightly, one of Mott's comments was that we would have to upgrade all the electrical supply into the building because of the addition. In other words, it will not support the addition. They also mentioned that, you know, it was 208 and we'd have to bring it up to 220. And one of the reasons for saying we needed to bring it up to 220 was that the 208 would be going away. The 208 will not be going away in the village. It is staying, it's permanent. There's no reason, and neither DP&L or the village have any plans to change the voltage supplied. So we have enough electric to run the current building, and you are allowed to bring in a completely new feed if the main construction that needs the additional electric is attached to the building, but by a breezeway with a fire door. And the fire door doesn't have to stay closed. It just needs to be able to close. This proposal, first of all, like Craig said, you're getting rid of perfectly good square footage, which is really disliked by a lot of people for no reason other than they dislike it. They actually don't have a solid reason for disliking the shoebox other than it's the shoebox. It is something we can use. And if we were to take the performing arts and those extra classrooms and put them off the back, my guess is it reduces the construction costs substantially because you've one large piece of construction. It's going to mean they can construct while the school is in action because we're not taking any classrooms away, which means we can get it done faster. And we would have to still do the security vestibule and the offices, but that would be a fairly small build that could probably be done without really disrupting the regular operation of the school. The band room, you know, I could see possibly maybe where it needs to go, you know, be demolished, but if the performing arts wasn't there, it could stay. And depending on the cost of rehab for that, could that even be made the teacher's lounge, which would free up another thing? I mean, it is square footage, and if the rehab of the square footage is cheaper than the new build of the square footage, why wouldn't we take the extra square footage and use it? Because that's all we hear about is a lack of space in the school. So that's my great piece there for a minute. Give it
Hey,
back to
David.
everyone else.
David,
Yeah.
what are you suggesting and to be fair, the modular units, the problem with them is moisture. It sounds like it's a big problem.
Yeah.
And we know some of the reasons for that, which are fixable potentially, but are you suggesting they would still be used as classrooms, or are you suggesting they're being used as something else?
They could be small offices, they could be small rooms for individual teaching, they could be storage for various things that the school needs to store, but they can't stay as if there's a moisture issue. The moisture issue, I believe, is mainly on the west end. When I was down in the crawl space, I didn't see a whole lot of moisture down there. There is a little piece of flashing that might need to be redone. There's a big drain comes off the school roof at the back where the doors come out of the 2000 wing. And I'm wondering if maybe, you know, the drain pipe for those could be cracked or something and actually leaking into them underground. I mean, this is just regular construction. It's not something amazing. It's not a rocket science thing. So we can certainly find where the moisture is and cure it for a whole lot less than probably even at the cost of demolishing them, would be my guess. I don't know if Mike has been down in there and looked at them from the perspective of rehab.
I believe you talk about Mike's team at Moats.
No, actually because if you had, or
no, I
whether
have
you
not.
just
I've
gotta-
not been underneath the foundation. I've been in the rooms.
Yeah.
Not been underneath the foundation.
Yeah. And also redoing the heating and cooling in there will put a better balance of air, which can also help to dehumidify. But it just seems a pity to get rid of really good space. Like Mike, I think you said it would cost us $1 million something to rebuild that amount of space. Like $1.5 million or $1.6 million.
Yeah, so just some comments. What you're both saying is totally possible. I mean, we could come up with a plan that leaves the band room and the shoebox in place and add an addition somewhere else. I don't know if you can see my screen.
Yeah.
This is kind of a crude what if, right?
Yeah.
What if that addition were over here or over here? And I just want to speak a few seconds to the planning implications of that. What I like to do when I approach a project is to just kind of think it through from the long term and make sure from a planning perspective you're making the right long-term decision. And the concern I would have with this is just like right now, this is a school that's spread all over the place. You've got a 3-story tower, which is very, very unique. And you've got conditions where you've got these back hallways over by the engineering lab, which feel remote and difficult to supervise. And in the proposal that I've shown here, it essentially kind of densifies or adds the construction in a way that doesn't continue to spread out that issue, but kind of pulls it together. Like, for example, making the underutilized corridor utilized, putting the construction where the people are, where the adjacencies make sense. So my concern about putting the addition somewhere else would just be that we may be exacerbating site or circulation issues within the building, making it kind of more difficult to manage the building.
Well, Mike, even if you took your red square and brought it down to where the band room is at the moment, or somewhere around there. So you're adding it onto the new music room and everything. No, move it over as your addition. So you'd add your extra classrooms on somewhere there. So you're still keeping inside your square somewhere.
Yeah, say something like this.
Yeah.
That would be, unfortunately this takes out the band room. But I would prefer this over the other.
Because now you've got all your that's even better, because now you actually have all your construction in one chunk. So when they bring in a crane and everything, it's all right there. You're not having to, the whole school can still function during construction.
Probably do it something like this. So yeah, that would be, if the board or the committee told me, okay, architect, we want you to keep the shoebox and find another way to do it.
Yeah.
But not kind of exacerbate the planning issues. I think that's a place that would make sense, taking a look at it.
Yeah. And then you've got your outdoor space, which you've got where the shoeboxes are. But we already have an enclosed, secure outdoor space where you were going to put those. That just needs an improvement. It just needs something to pep it up, to make it look artsy, crafty, modern, like a modern school would have. I don't know, colored painted bars, better seating arrangement things at different levels, tables, maybe some, I don't know if you put plastic bushes in schools, but yeah.
One other thing to consider is there interest in making any investment in the shoebox at all to address Mote's had some pretty serious concerns on the electrical consumption of the HVAC system. Because if it is, it just could be more expensive, right? If we're putting an addition over here and then keeping the shoebox, but yet having to put money into it to deal with the moisture issues and the HVAC issues, it could be a more expensive option.
I just got a message from Jerry that his mic is not working. And this kind of comes up in thinking about what he's asking is your thoughts on phasing and the necessity to move students out of the building while work is in progress. We know that at Oakwood, they managed to do that $18 million renovation in the summers and when students were there at some points, and some was over COVID, though it was unclear to me how much got done during that period when the school was closed. But I'm just looking at the modulars and in thinking about the phasing and where students could be while construction is happening. And I'm, potentially there is space to be used while you're doing some of the other work.
Yeah, there's no doubt that in this plan in particular, if you're keeping the modulars and putting the addition somewhere else.
No, I'm
that-
not even necessarily
that would help.
suggesting that. I'm wondering if there's a way to use it, even if you're eventually, if you're going to put that new construction there. I don't know.
I mean, is there a way to use these
Yes,
somewhere else for your swing space?
as part of your swing space while you're doing other work. I'm not sure if there is, if you're building that new construction right next to it, but probably not.
It would,
Say you do for work, making this plan work, you do the construction at the front of the building, the performing arts and secure vestibule. Performing arts, if you don't have to tear down the band room, then those spaces don't need be used right now. They're additional space to what we already have. So they can be temporary classroom space while the second phase on the next to the modular units is done. And we probably could keep everybody in the building and functioning. There are spaces like the fitness room, which is a very large space with, in my experience, very little occupancy. There are spaces that can be used, just like Oakwood used different spaces in their building on a temporary basis to house classes while certain classrooms were being worked on. So I think that's possible with what we have here. We just have to be a little bit clever about it. You don't take out the French room to expand the kitchen until you've got the space, somewhere else, because we know we can get along without the big kitchen until we need it. And then, but that provides a temporary classroom since we don't teach French anymore. And so forth and so on. The Kiva was a classroom for a long time. And so there's a great deal of flexibility within the existing space, I believe, to keep everything functioning while, if you were going to demolish the modular units. I'm not advocating demolishing them, but I don't think that going with this plan necessarily means that you would have to find additional classroom space.
I was going to say, I'm sorry, Mike. I was going to say that I think it would be good for us to talk to, I'm not sure who, and I'm sure you would know, or maybe you already have all the information, but I was wondering if it would make sense to talk to someone at Oakwood who oversaw that the renovation and the way they, how it affected classes and how they moved people around, how they made it work. They sounded like they were very creative about it, and in basically not having to find other swing space while they were doing the work that they were doing. So
well, I'll just make a couple comments. I would envision this to be like a 15-month build schedule where you've got work that's happening during the school year, but then big chunks of work that are happening in summer number 1 and summer number 2. So what we would do in our summer work is do the deep stuff that you can't do while students are occupying the building. Things like if there is an electrical service upgrade or a renovation of the kitchen, or things that have to be done, major plumbing work, major restroom renovations. you line that up for either summer number 1 or summer number 2. And then through the school year, you're doing a phased renovation. At Oakwood, they did go second shift. So they had the contractors show up on site after the students left the building, and then they worked on second shift through a phased renovation. And at Oakwood in particular, they had no modulars, so they were creative. And I had 3 kids in the building, so I heard all about it. But for example, the stage was used for French class. The lobby was used for another class. And Dr. Paul Waller and Tim Bradenhouse, the principals, would be good resources to talk to about how you kind of work through staff and communicate and kind of create temporary conditions. Another approach is if that's not tenable or feasible, that we've done on other projects. I'll jump into the high school, middle school here. I don't know if you can see on my screen. Is we brought in essentially a little modular building, leased it for a year. So this could be installed summer number 1, and then it would provide 6 classrooms. It would be adjacent to the building, so the students could swing out into that modular space to vacate space in the building for what we call this phased renovation. The nice thing about keeping the kids on site is, your administration is on the site, the gym is on the site, the kitchen is on the site. There's a lot of reasons it's nice to be there. But this is an option to consider, a small temporary building at both sites. And the trade-off and the analysis that just needs to happen is, does it speed up construction enough that it pays for itself? And in my experience, it generally does, because if it allows you to cycle through your phases quicker, because you have swing space to move out to, and the contractors can move quicker, that saves on their duration and their general conditions and their overhead and their profit and whatnot. So I know I'm getting kind of ahead of myself, but I think with a renovation addition plan such as this, you could either do it internally and creatively, Richard, like you were suggesting, or you could bring in a small temporary leased modular building that could be used, or maybe there's some offsite opportunity.
So Mike, can I ask you there? So if we were to, let's just say next November, there was a levy passed, would that be that would be 27 when the building would be finished roughly, or would it be 28?
23. Let's see. So if it passed
At the end of
in
23.
23, and you're really not going to get started on design till, say, beginning of 24, you're designing in 24, you're starting construction in 25, and then it would be essentially 15 months. So no, I think I'd have to lay it out, but I think you're in the 26, 27 window.
Yeah. So just going back to the modulars, if the modulars are as bad as we should get rid of them, then we really shouldn't have kids in them for another 6 years. I mean, if they're good enough for 6 more years, then they're probably good enough to do something with. I mean, we really should be looking at those and saying, is this usable space? And if it's good usable space, if it's bad usable space, we either need to fix them because we need the space for something, because they're going to be in them for 6 years, and then they're good enough to keep, or we shouldn't be using them at all. So it's a shame to knock them down if they're usable. I know I just keep repeating this like a stuck record, but it's a big chunk of space. I mean, it's as big as all the classroom space we would be building. So it
seems like we could, I'm sorry, it seems like we could probably come up with a cost of renovation for that section, just to see, how much it would cost us to keep it versus how much it would cost us to lose it.
Yeah, it would be less expensive to keep it than to replace all that with new construction at today's construction costs, for sure.
Mhm.
And the moisture issues, et cetera. I mean, I guess we need to talk to Michael Murdoch. I mean, we know there are conditions there that are not okay and that they
Yes.
need to be addressed. And, you know, the question is, are they addressable? Are they effectively addressable? I realize these are not trailers. They are actually the same as a stick-built building. They are modular units that were built off-site and then brought in. But there's been, you know, ongoing complaints about quality of air quality, et cetera. But we know we're going to need to replace HVAC and air exchanges and all of that. So I guess we just have to wait for Michael Murdoch, and maybe we can ask him, you know, what would it cost to really bring it up to a proper, you know, a good level and to be able to be usable. I guess you guys are talking about using it as classroom space. I was thinking of using it as, or maybe not classroom space. I'm not sure what you're thinking, but I was imagining using it for other kinds of needs. But of course, then you can't put that new construction right there. So, which has its own rationale that makes sense. My question, I guess I have a question. We know if we pass a levy in 23 for renovation, the next summer, I mean, is it possible by the next summer, you're not doing the whole, that you can start addressing systems in this next summer, i.e. HVAC, air exchange, things that we know are kind of at the top level of concern by teachers, as well as new windows in the 1952 wing of Mills Lawn? Are those things that you can, I mean, that doesn't need a lot of planning. We're not changing the exterior of the building. We're just putting new windows in. I mean, how far out do you have to be to start making those kind of improvements? And if you're doing deep renovation, can a first step of that be putting in those new windows, or is that not in the right sequence? Because to me, those, and then there's the roof, of course, the roofs.
Yep. Yeah, so it kind of depends on what the scope ends up being, but surely there's some work that could happen in that first summer. The challenge will be, so let's say your design team starts designing in January, for work to begin in June, it would have to be bid in April, May, and to bid something in that time frame, you'd have to have the drawings done, say, by March. So to have all the drawings done for this entire project in those 3 months is not possible. But what you could do is find some discrete portion of the scope and peel it out and take advantage of that summer to do it. Like, for example, if there's abatement work that needs to happen over that summer, it'd be a perfect opportunity to do it. Or if there's any elements of the building that make sense to install ahead of time, that makes sense. The challenge might be is you're moving forward on a piece of it without really knowing the total cost of everything, because you haven't bid the full project, you just bid certain parts and pieces. But if you know you're doing a renovation and you know those are prioritized improvements that you want to make, there's no reason you couldn't get something started that first summer.
One of the other considerations, and we'll want to check with Jay McGrath about this. I don't believe if we pass a levy in November of 23 that we will receive the money for that until early 25. I could be wrong about that, but I don't believe we'll receive that money anytime early in 24.
Well, we should check with Jay. However, I know we had talked about if we put it on the ballot this coming spring or in the fall, I thought it started being collected in the January of that, 2 months later, that it would be the same no matter whether you put it on the ballot in the spring or the fall. But I don't know how quick you can actually access the money. So
I believe there's a significant lag in that, if memory serves.
Mhm.
From a schedule standpoint, it would actually be better if you put this on the ballot in May of 23.
Mhm.
And the reason I say that is it would allow the full design cycle to happen, which would take, say, 11 months. And then you can bid it and have all the work ready to roll that summer of 24. And you would save on, what, 6 months of escalation. So there's advantages of going quicker, but of course we can't get ahead of the process in the community and the board.
Mike, have you come up with a rough cost for all of this? Are you still around about the 23 or something?
I'm working on that with Moats, and I think I will not let the cat out of the bag. Our goal is to get a draft of that out this Friday,
Okay, great.
so you can see it ahead of next week.
And will we have a draft, roughly an approximate price then of what a complete new school would be if we were starting from scratch to compare it to?
Yeah, my charge, and Judith, correct me if I'm wrong, is to actually not provide that information next week, but to provide that directly to the board, who will be requesting me to do that.
Yeah. Okay, that's
I think
great.
early next year. So you will have the comparison of the renovation addition plan to a new build plan.
Mm-hmm.
And without getting too much in the weeds, one of the challenges is comparing them is you're not comparing apples to apples necessarily,
Yeah.
because there's a lot more square footage in this renovation addition plan than there is in the new build plan. Was 105,000 square feet. And we are north of, we're at 55, and I think we're north of 130,000 square feet. So there's significantly more square footage in this than in the new build. So it just needs to be part of that conversation.
Yeah. Yeah. So actually we end up with a smaller school with a new build than what we have at the moment then.
Or you need to add square footage to the 105,000 square feet to make it a comparable plan. Like, for
But if
example,
we do that, then we have to fund it ourselves as a village. We wouldn't get any state money for that.
yes. So let's say you went through a programming process and determined that we really need 115,000 square feet, not 105.
Mm-hmm.
Those 10,000 square feet, you can still build those. It's just there would be no potential future state credit on 27% of the cost.
Yeah.
Whatever
Yeah.
your split is. I'm not sure if it's 27.
Yeah.
Part of
Yeah.
the,
Seven.
excuse me,
27.
I'm sorry, I'm interrupting you.
No, 27% kickback from the state in
Yeah.
the future.
I was going to say part of the charge to the committee is to provide, options, renovation options. We were calling it permanent improvement plan options. Basically, it's coming to the same thing at different price points. And we also have in our charge a prioritization, of needs. Much of that, I think, will need to be done by the administration and the teachers who, are looking at the educational needs. So I think how you're coming up with your cost, Mike, am I right to say you're going to be sort of pricing out different aspects of the renovation plan? And then, certain things are essential in any renovation plan, i.e. mechanical system, mechanical systems. I was looking at the Oakwood as kind of a model of thinking, what are those basic needs and that we know we need to address. So those things would be the basic, kind of a baseline cost. And then the other cost of everything that's been recommended by our administrative staff, you'll be costing out by, how are you going to separate it out? I guess that's my question. So that then after that, I'm assuming they will be thinking about prioritization if we have to be thinking about possibly not being able to do all of it.
Sure. So I'm going to be presenting a budget kind of exactly, Judith, as you described, is in two buckets. Bucket number one would be like a foundational phase. And this would be similar to that kind of the Oakwood project where you address the major envelope issues, the major systems upgrades, deep renovation in the restrooms, deal with safety and security through your secure vestibules, as kind of a first chunk, calling that foundational phase. And then we're going to price everything else into a second bucket called the additional cost required to get to this full vision. So we're going to have foundational phase, additional work required, and then a grand total. And then the work will begin. We're going to line item. It's still going to be on a cost per square foot basis since we're still in a planning phase, but it's going to be line itemed out sufficiently that anyone with an Excel file can take a chunk of scope and move it from one phase to the other and see what that does to the bottom line. And I'm hoping we present it in a format that gives you enough information that you're able to consider what the alternatives are, and if there's further discussions about slicing and dicing, that it's presented in a way that helps the committee do that.
That would be great.
I think some of the slicing and dicing would probably be happening at the school board versus the committee.
Something you've talked a little bit about is how the timing of the whole process in various ways makes a difference in the cost. For example, I gather that it's better to say, to the extent possible, you're doing everything at once. You don't bring the contractor on to do phase one and you get that all done and you dust your hands off, and then you don't start phase two for a couple years in the future. Is that true, or are there, for example, we're talking about right now 2 different buildings. Are we doing the work on both buildings at the same time?
Yes, I would recommend it. So let's just take a hypothetical $20 million scope of work and say it's escalating at 6% a year, which is probably low. And divide that over 12 months. Every month you don't go is $100,000. That either the project costs more or $100,000 of scope you have to pull out. So by, deferring a levy by 6 months could be a $600,000 decision. And that's a very real thing. And that's why you want to get these to market as quickly as you can. And you want to do them simultaneously. You don't want to do a phased project where you say you do Mills Lawn first and then come back and do the high school second, because it stretches it out into further years that are also escalating.
I think this is a great place to start. I think you've done a huge amount of work, Mike, in bringing together what the teachers want and rearranging. I think Mills Lawn is phenomenal the way you've rearranged it. And I think, the high school and middle school, it's been, it's great how you've moved everything around to fit everyone in. And it's nice with the new groupings you've got. You've really done a huge amount of work for it. It'll be great if we can make a budget work for it.
When are we getting those numbers, Mike? Are we going to get them Friday? I guess that was the question I had.
Yes, I've been Michael Murdoch from Oates has been out of town, so we've been doing some online, but essentially what I'm trying to do is, the part I'm waiting on is to get the moat scope and the THP scope bifurcated into the two buckets. In other words, what goes into bucket one and what goes into bucket two, and what are those totals? So I'm working on that. And I'm hoping that that comes together in the next couple days. And on Friday, I can send out a essentially a PDF of an Excel spreadsheet with the budget.
Mike, help me a little bit. Why are you taking the two bucket approach? I mean,
So-
you're saying everything needs to be done and it needs to be done all together. So what benefit do we get by breaking it down?
Well, this will ultimately be if I put my board hat on, is a question of what's passable.
Okay,
What would the public be willing to support? And I'll just tell you Oakwood's story. And I'm not recommending you do what they did, but I'll just tell you what they did is we went through a master planning process with them. We presented them an initial budget, and it was many magnitudes of order more than they thought they could pass. So the board got together and they put their thinking cap on. They said, okay, design team, we're going to put an $18 million bond issue on the ballot. We think that's passable. And tell us what kind of prioritized scope we can get for that. So what I just wanted to do, and Judith has actually requested this, was to present the budget in such a way that you see some flexibility and some options on what you do. You don't necessarily have to do everything all at once, which is what makes a renovation addition project more attractive, is you can prioritize it and you can get the cost down to what you feel like the community is willing to support. So that was the thought, was to just provide some options for moving forward. Versus if I just came in with a bottom line, that's whatever it was. And people are like, wait a minute, I mean, it's going to be cheaper than a new build, but there's a lot of work here and it's going to be an expensive plan. And is there a way to look at it in chunks or prioritized buckets? That was the thought.
And it was what our charge was, actually. Our charge was such that, Mike had suggested at our last facility committee meeting that we give he and Michael Murdoch some direction. And I think you suggested 15, 20, 25 million dollars as a way to constrain what you're thinking about and what you're going to be bringing to us. The school board didn't choose to do it that way, but nonetheless, we've gotten a charge that we need to meet the goals of the charge, and so that prioritization, and we know certain things are not have to be done. There's not something that you can just say, well, we don't have the money to do that. There are certain things that are essential, and separating out the essentials in terms of building, particularly mechanical systems, roof, those kind of things, windows that are single pane, the secure vestibules, essential. So having those costs together, to me, make a lot of sense. And then what you add to it is a lot what I think the educators, the teachers and administration, that prioritization is going to be a lot on their shoulders, and not so much on those of you who are here because of your knowledge of buildings. So
what occurred to me when we think about all the people that have had input into this plan, the people that haven't given their input in any direct way are the voters. And that's another group that we have to please. Not Yeah, we have to, yes, we have to please the teachers and the students and the administrators and the board members, but we also have to please the voters. And Scott spoke to that at our last meeting, that we have to have something that resonates with the community, and we don't know for sure why what has been proposed in the past didn't work, but we have to feel our way to find something that will work now.
Well, and that's where I believe our process is so important. I feel like we have just, I think I wrote this to you all. I think it's really important that we exhaust to the greatest extent that we can our research into these matters, so that we can lay it out there for the public, the voting public, and eliminate some of the speculation and the gossip and the unfounded stuff that gets circulated in the cesspool that is social media, so that we can have factual discussions about this stuff. And I guess I see that as that's where time is really working against us here. And I think we've got a lot to do if we're going to provide this kind of provide a really cogent report that I feel it's very important for us to try and come together on something that we can say, yeah, this may not be what I wanted, but I at least agree with the conclusions here. Hope that makes sense.
It makes sense to me. I mean, I kind of fussed about the last bond issue because we weren't voting on a school. We were voting on, just give us some money and then we'll figure out what we're going to build. But as Mike points out, until you have a financial commitment, you can't do the detailed design work that's necessary. And so we have to be careful that our concepts that we put forward are concepts that we can back up with the reality of what it costs, or the wherewithal it takes to make them happen, and to gain that voter confidence.
Yep. One of the things, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead, Scott.
I was going to say, one of the things that I would like to at least put out there, and Mike made a really good point here. If we're looking at $100,000 that we lose for every month that we're not taking action, the cost of running a special election, which I believe Jay said was about $30,000, seems to become pretty small in comparison. If having putting an issue on the ballot in April or May, whichever the election month is of next year, gets us the money a year earlier, and I believe it does, I'm willing to spend $30,000 as opposed to $100,000 a month for every month that we lose not being able to get whatever the project is off the ground. Time's really our enemy here, I think.
The thing about it is, Scott, and I don't remember, I mean, I know to get it on the ballot in November, we got to know sometime around June or July what we're doing. And so we would have to make a very quick decision in order to get it on in May. So, and I don't know if we'll be able to do that.
Are you
We
permitted to do?
We didn't think we could when we talked about it at the last school board meeting. So, and in fact, Jay was talking about, even later than next fall, but the school board said no. That's, we need to move more quickly. So, but I hear what you're saying. If we could make a decision that quick, that'd be great. Is there anything else?
I guess one other question I have, Mike, is how fragile is this plan in the context of a potential change in school organization where 6th grade was to move to the other facility? Does that throw it all up in the air? Or is that a relatively minor adjustment from your perspective?
I think it would be a fairly minor adjustment from my perspective. It could mean that, like, for example, it could mean that this addition at Mills Lawn doesn't happen. And the additions planned for the middle school, high school grow a bit. So it'd be moving some square footage from one side to the other. And even when we present the numbers, I don't think it's having an appreciable difference on the numbers, because you're either potentially adding addition to one side or the other, but if they're all going in at the same cost per square foot at this point, it would be a pretty easy switch.
Okay,
Mike, in thinking about that, I mean, the drawings haven't changed much in terms of new construction. In fact, I don't think they've changed at all at the middle high school when you thought the 6th grade was going there. And if that could, it has appeared to me that if that actually happened, that the, Mills Lawn, if we're losing the 6th grade, we're gaining 2 rooms. It made me wonder if we really needed, would then need the new construction at Mills Lawn, which again, it appeared to me that we actually would save some money by if 6th grade did move, but
And I will say there's some of that may be true, but also between the faculty input in work session number 3, Jack's perspective was, I think there were some classrooms that he hadn't accounted for or missed.
Oh, I see.
Some intervention space. He created that open extended learning area on the 2nd floor. So it may not be quite as simple as we could take the Mills Lawn addition away and not have to add anything to the middle school, high school without kind of re-engaging Jack on that matter.
One thing in this plan of middle high school, all the teachers have their own classrooms, correct? And that's not something you would find in a new build.
Correct. Yeah. In the 105,000 square foot new pre-K to 12, your middle school, high school teachers would be sharing classrooms. In addition to all the other items I brought up on the area analysis, comparing the two.
Okay. You said these aren't going to be apples to apples. Do you have a way, because there's going to be a lot more square footage in a renovation plan, assuming we built out everything you're recommending, how are we going to be able to think, or do you have suggestions about how we're going to be able to make comparisons?
I do. The suggestion would be to add, to provide the cost for the 105,000 square feet project in the 2023 dollars, but then also do an option that adds square footage to it. A certain amount of square footage that would, I think, make them more kind of apples to apples on a square footage basis. And price that as well.
Anybody have anything else? We can maybe let you go. What time is it? Oh, it is 5:30.
Right on time.
Thank you, everybody, for participating. Tomorrow we'll be meeting with Michael Murdoch at the same time, same place. Scott's going to be hosting it. Thank you, Scott, so much for being a part of this. And
no problem.
Until tomorrow. And thanks, Mike.
Thanks,
You're
Scott.
welcome.
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you
Yeah.
all. Take care.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, everyone.
All right.